A quick synopsis of the passage. In the first paragraph, author argues that distinct languages of cultural minorities in the United States encourage discrimination against them. Because they speak different languages, they are discriminated against. In a second paragraph, he gives us an example of Spanish speaking communities that have retained their language for many generations, and it has inadvertently caused the discrimination against them. In a third paragraph, author introduces a new dimension to discussion, and he says this fact that Spanish speaking communities have retained their language and it encourages discrimination against them. This fact makes a case for bilingual education in these community schools, but the political consequences of such education run poles from inclusion of these communities into the United States culture to exclusion of it. So the political consequences are uncertain. What will actually happen if bilingual education is adopted in these schools? Nobody knows. In the next paragraph, author says, though the possible consequences of bilingual education are uncertain, Hispanic communities stand united in their demand for bilingual education as a demand for inclusion. So they want bilingual education in their schools. Okay. Finally, in the last paragraph, author gives his view. He concludes by saying, forcing English as the official language will be counterintuitive to the goal of inclusion of these communities, and it is unnecessary as well. So basically, he's against making English the official language for these communities. All right, let's look at the questions now. It can be inferred from the passage that one of the characteristics of immigrant groups to the United States has traditionally been that after immigration, relatively few members of the group, all right, now here traditionally, English has replaced the native language of immigrant groups by the second or third generation. Some characteristics of today's Spanish-speaking population, however, suggest the possibility of a departure from this historical pattern. Okay, so this paragraph is going to be our source for this question. Let's look at the options now. And do not forget the question. Question says, after immigration, relatively few members of the group do something. Okay. Option A, relatively few members of the group sought assimilation into the dominant culture. It is the opposite, because it was written that traditionally English has replaced the native language. If English has replaced the native language traditionally, it means most of the immigrants adopt English. In other words, most of the immigrants assimilate into the dominant culture. They absorb into the dominant culture. And question says relatively few members of the group do so, which is quite the opposite. Relatively few members moved back and forth repeatedly between the United States and their former communities. Okay. Now, please understand the thought flow here. Author says Spanish speaking communities are different from traditional immigrants. And how are they different? He explains that many families of Spanish speaking population retain ties in Latin America, and they move back and forth between their present and former communities, which means traditionally the immigrants of other groups do not do so. Therefore, relatively few members of the group do so. Relatively few members of the group moved back and forth repeatedly between the United States and their former communities is the correct answer. Option B should be correct. Option C is tempting. Relatively few members of the group used their native language in their new communities. It is written that adoption of English happens only by the second or third generation. So to say that relatively few members of the group use their native language in their new communities would be wrong, because the first generation immigrants, right after immigration, they keep using their native languages. So it is wrong to say that relatively few members do so. So though tempting, it is wrong. Option D, relatively few members of the group suffered discrimination in their new communities. This we cannot conclude, we cannot infer. There is data insufficiency. We don't know whether members of the other immigrant groups have suffered any discrimination or not. Okay. Question 8. The passage suggests that one of the effects of the debate over bilingual education is that, okay, here he says the issue of bilingual education has nevertheless served to unite the leadership of Hispanic communities. So Hispanic communities have united, and they stand united in the demand for bilingual education. So let's see. Option A. It has given the Hispanic community a newfound pride in their culture. There's no talk of pride. They have united, but there's no talk of pride. So alien idea. It has hampered the education of Spanish-speaking students. Again, alien idea. Option C, it has demonstrated the negative impact of imposing English, as the English has not been imposed as the official United States language yet. There's only talk of it. This is also beyond the scope of the passage. Option D, this debate over bilingual education has provided an overarching banner under which the Spanish-speaking communities could rally. Rally means come together. And this overarching banner means basically this is a common cause. So bilingual, the issue of bilingual education has given them a common cause to unite, to come together. That is exactly what the passage said. So option D is the correct answer. Question number 9. In the third paragraph, the phrase different political agendas refers specifically to conflicting opinions regarding what? Okay. Here he says the issue is important for people with different political agendas, from absorption at one pole to separatism at the other. Okay. So he has already, the author has already told us that different political agendas refers to conflicting opinions about whether to absorb the Spanish-speaking communities into the dominant cultural pattern of United States or to separate them. Basically, inclusion and exclusion are the two poles being talked about. So there are conflicting opinions about whether to include them in the dominant culture or not. Okay. Option A, extent to which the Hispanics, which is Spanish-speaking community, should blend into the larger United States society. Exactly what we are looking for. Option A is the correct answer. Methods, all other three answer choices actually are irrelevant. Okay. Question 10. In last paragraph, the author says it would be unwise to require the universal use of English. One reason he gives is that, okay, option A, it is not clear yet whether requiring the universal use of English would promote or hinder the education of children whose English is limited. He does say here, given the present state of understanding about the effects of bilingual education on learning, basically he says because we are not sure about the effects of bilingual education on learning, it would be unwise to require the universal use of English. So it is option A paraphrases this idea. It is not clear what effects the universal use of English would have on learning of the students belonging to this community. Therefore, it should not be implemented. Option is a paraphrase of the sentence. Option B says the nation's Hispanic leaders have shown that bilingual education is most effective. Alien ideas, both of them. They have not shown anything. They're only arguing. They're only demanding bilingual education. The question of language in the schools should be answered by those who evaluate bilingual education. Author has never mentioned these people. Option D, it has been shown that bilingual education is necessary to avoid, well, again, it has not been shown, so this is also alien idea. There's no evidence. It's only a demand. Okay. Question 11. In the last paragraph, author of the passage is primarily concerned with discussing what? Clearly, in the last paragraph, author discourages the universal application or universal use of English, and he's against making English the official language, and he discusses the reasons for the same. Option A, reasons against enacting a measure, right, enforcing English as the official language that would mandate the forced inclusion of immigrant groups within the dominant united culture. Absolutely correct. So option A should be the correct answer. Option B, the virtues and limitations of declaring English as the official language. Author never discusses the benefits, the merits. He only discusses the demerits of declaring English as the official language. So option B goes out. Option C, the history of the attitudes within the Hispanic community towards bilingual. This is again alien. Author does not discuss the history of their attitudes. The importance for immigrant groups of maintaining large segments of their culture to pass on to their children. There's no talk of English as the official language in this option. So clearly out, correct answer option A.